two plants are growing right now that could replace your entire feed bill. One contains up to 38% protein and was banned in major American cities. The other feeds 800 million people in Africa, while Western agriculture pretends it does not exist. They are not alone. There are 5 more plants just like them. Each of them grows without irrigation, and they feed humans and animals. They were systematically erased from modern farming. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what these plants are, why they were buried, and how to grow unlimited protein on your property for the rest of your life. The first plant is probably growing within a few miles of where you are sitting right now. Scientists call it Morus alba. Most people call it the white mulberry tree. In 1984, the city of Tucson, Arizona made it illegal to plant one. Las Vegas followed in 1991. El Paso, Texas prohibited all new mulberry trees in 1992. Albuquerque, New Mexico still bans residents from introducing new mulberry trees on their property. You might wonder why a city government would ban a tree. The official reason is pollen. Mulberry trees produce allergens, but here is what they never mention in those city council meetings. The white mulberry was first imported to Virginia after the settlement of Jamestown. King James I encouraged planting mulberries to develop the silk industry because silkworms eat the leaves. This tree fed an entire industry. It spread across America for 300 years. And suddenly, in the 1980s, cities started making it illegal. Here's what the research actually shows about this banned tree. The protein content in mulberry leaves ranges from 232 to 386 grams per kilogram. That means these leaves contain between 23 and 38% protein. Compare that to alfalfa hay, the gold standard of animal feed, which typically contains 15 to 20% protein. Mulberry leaves beat it. The mineral content makes this even more significant. Mulberry leaves contain 2.42 to 4.71% calcium and 0.23 to 0.97% phosphorus. These are the exact minerals your livestock need for bone development and milk production. The metabolizable energy reaches 1,130 to 2,240 kilocalories per kilogram with almost no anti-nutritional factors. Researchers in tropical countries conducted feeding trials. Scientists fed mulberry leaves to sheep as a partial replacement for lucerne hay and concentrates. The results showed no significant differences in dry matter digestibility, crude protein digestibility, or crude fiber digestibility. The researchers concluded that mulberry leaves have an appreciable potential as a protein source in sheep feeding. From these results, it is inferred that mulberry leaves with their high protein and low fiber content and their high digestibility may be used as a supplementary protein source for ruminants. The productivity numbers reveal why this matters for your feed bill. The biomass yield of fresh mulberry leaves reaches 15 to 22 tons per hectare per year. One tree produces that much nutrition annually, and it keeps producing for decades without replanting. But this tree does not only feed animals. Traditional Chinese medicine has used mulberry leaves for centuries. Modern research confirms why. The primary active compounds include polysaccharides, polyphenols, and alkaloids. Studies show antioxidant effects, lipid-lowering properties, blood sugar reduction, liver protection, antibacterial activity, and anti-cancer potential. A 2016 test tube study found that mulberries may help manage diabetes by slowing down the increase in blood sugar after meals. The fruit provides human nutrition. The leaves feed your livestock. The tree grows in your backyard. And 4. American cities made it illegal to plant one. The second plant feeds more people than any crop you have ever heard of on Western news. Cassava is a vital food crop in sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, the Pacific, and South America. It serves as a staple for approximately 800 million people. That is more than the entire population of Europe. Cassava leaves are consumed as a vegetable in at least 60% of countries in sub-Saharan Africa and some Asian countries such as Indonesia, the Philippines, and Malaysia. Here is what Western agriculture never told you about this plant. The protein content of cassava leaves ranges from 14 to 40% of dry matter in various varieties. The amino acid composition is comparable to fresh egg protein and higher than soybean protein. Read that again. A leaf that grows in tropical soil contains protein comparable to eggs and superior to soybeans. On average, a meal prepared from cassava leaves contains 210 grams per kilogram of crude protein, 250 grams per kilogram of acid detergent fiber, 85 grams per kilogram of ash, 14.5 grams per kilogram of calcium, and 4.5 grams per kilogram of phosphorus. The productivity makes this plant extraordinary. Cassava can produce a high yield of protein up to 4 tons per hectare per year. Cassava leaves produce about 10 to 15 tons of dry matter per hectare. This could become an important source of protein in the form of protein extracts for monogastrics, and the fibrous residue could be used as forage for cattle. For human consumption, a 100-gram serving of boiled cassava leaves contains about 21% crude protein. It also contains 160 milligrams of calcium, 2.6 milligrams of iron, 2 milligrams of zinc, and 1.7 milligrams of niacin. Young, tender cassava leaves are a good source of dietary proteins and vitamin K. Vitamin K has a potential role in bone strengthening by stimulating osteoblastic cell activity in the bones. Now, here is the part that Western agriculture uses as an excuse to ignore this plant. Cassava contains cyanogenic compounds which can be toxic, but traditional cultures solved this problem centuries ago. The best processing method for cassava leaves as human food is pounding the leaves and cooking the mash in water. Fermentation, boiling, and ensiling are efficient techniques for removing cyanide from cassava. After 10 hours of extraction with water, all experiments resulted in less than 9.5 parts per million of hydrogen cyanide. That is less than the toxicity level recommended by the World Health Organization, which is 10 parts per million. Traditional preparation works. You peel and grate the roots, then soak the gratings in water for prolonged fermentation. Then cook thoroughly to release the volatile hydrogen cyanide gas. Cutting the roots into small pieces followed by soaking and boiling in water is particularly effective. Cultures across Africa and Asia have done this for generations. The knowledge exists. It was simply never taught in Western agriculture. The animal feeding trials prove the value. Researchers tested cassava leaf silage as a protein supplement for livestock. The significant increases in digestible crude protein intake and nitrogen retention were associated with an increase of average daily weight gain from 41.4 grams to between 45 and 50 grams per head per day. Cassava leaf silage has potential as a protein feed supplement to improve livestock productivity. Your animals gain weight faster. Your feed bill drops to zero. The plant grows without irrigation in tropical and subtropical climates. 800 million people depend on it, and you probably never heard its name until today. Mulberry and cassava are not alone. There are 5 more plants that traditional cultures never forgot.
Walk on to any small farm in England during the 1950s. You would see something strange. Green plants standing 3 feet tall in dedicated beds near the pig pens. Farmers cutting armloads of broad, fuzzy leaves. Pigs rushing to the fence line at the sound of the blade. This was Comfrey, and for centuries across Europe and Asia, this scene repeated on thousands of farms. In Russia, they called it Zivikost. The word translates to bone healer. Soviet collective farms documented Comfrey feeding trials from the 1930s through the 1960s. Agricultural scientists in Moscow recorded pigs consuming up to 20 kilograms of fresh Comfrey daily. The animals gained weight. The feed costs dropped. The reports filled filing cabinets in agricultural ministries. In Japan, farmers integrated Comfrey into what Masanobu Fukuoka would later call natural farming. Small holdings outside Osaka and Kyoto maintained Comfrey patches specifically for pig supplementation. The knowledge passed from generation to generation through practice rather than textbooks. In England, a man named Lawrence D. Hills spent 40 years proving what traditional farmers already knew. Hills founded the Henry Doubleday Research Association in 1954. He established trial gardens at Barking in Essex. He tested Comfrey varieties systematically. He documented yields and he recorded protein content. He developed the cultivar now known as Bocking 14. This single variety would become the most important comfrey for livestock feeding ever created. The research exists, the feeding trials were conducted, and the results were documented. Then the filing cabinets closed. Comfrey produces 18 to 25% crude protein on a dry matter basis. This matches alfalfa, and it exceeds most pasture grasses. It even rivals the soybean meal that modern farmers purchase at commodity prices. The protein is not the only story. The amino acid profile includes lysine at levels that specifically address pig dietary requirements. Pigs are not ruminants. They cannot efficiently digest cellulose like cattle can. But Comfrey offers a protein structure and digestibility that monogastric animals actually thrive on. Picture a comfrey plant from the side. Above ground, you see broad leaves covered in fine hairs. The plant reaches 2 to 3 feet at maturity. But below ground, the real machinery operates. Comfrey taproots penetrate 6 to 10 feet into the earth, and those are deep roots. While your pasture grasses compete for nutrients in the top 6 inches of soil, Comfrey mines treasure from depths your tractor never reaches. Those deep roots access mineral deposits that shallow-rooted crops cannot touch. Potassium concentrations in Comfrey leaves reach 5 to 8% of dry weight. Calcium hits 1 to 2%. Phosphorus accumulates. Trace minerals concentrate. The plant functions as a biological pump, drawing fertility from the subsoil and depositing it in leaves that you harvest and feed to your pigs. The production numbers make commercial crops look modest. A well-established Comfrey bed yields 80 to 120 tons of fresh matter per acre per year. No irrigation required once the roots establish. No annual replanting. No seed purchases. One decision by one farmer creates infrastructure that produces for 20 years or more. Stay until the end of this video. I will show you exactly how to establish this permanent feed system on your land. But first, you need to understand why you have never heard of it. The suppression of Comfrey was not a conspiracy. It was something more effective. It was economics operating exactly as designed. Follow the money backward from your local feed store. The bag of pig feed on the shelf connects to a supply chain. Corn from Iowa, soybeans from Brazil, processing facilities in multiple states, transportation networks spanning continents. Each link in that chain employs people. Each link generates revenue. Each link creates quarterly earnings for shareholders. Now consider Comfrey. You buy root cuttings once. You plant them once. You harvest 4 to 5 times per year for 2 decades. Where is the repeat revenue? Where is the annual seed sale? Where is the processing margin? Where is the transportation fee? The answer is nowhere. Comfrey generates no recurring transactions. A plant that replaces itself cannot support a supply chain. After World War II, the industrialization of agriculture accelerated across America and Europe. Corn and soybean lobbies shaped agricultural policy. Extension services received funding from input suppliers. Land-grant universities built partnerships with industry. The institutions that educated farmers became dependent on the companies selling to farmers. When the companies selling feed also fund the research about feeding, certain questions stop being asked, certain plants stop being studied, certain knowledge stops being transmitted. The Henry Doubleday Research Association continued its work at Bocking. Lawrence Hills published books and pamphlets. Small farmers in England maintained their Comfrey beds. But the mainstream agricultural establishment looked elsewhere. The filing cabinets stayed closed. The knowledge remained in the margins. Then came the pyrrolizidine alkaloid controversy. In the 1970s and the 1980s, researchers identified compounds called pyrrolizidine alkaloids in Comfrey plants. These compounds can cause liver damage under specific conditions. Headlines spread. Warnings were issued. Comfrey developed a reputation as dangerous. But examine the research closely. The studies focused on human internal consumption. They examined people eating Comfrey leaves directly or drinking Comfrey root tea. They used species with high alkaloid content. They administered concentrated extracts at dosages no traditional use ever approached. Livestock metabolism differs significantly from human metabolism. Pigs process plant compounds through different pathways. Feeding trials conducted over decades showed no liver damage at recommended inclusion rates. The research that condemned Comfrey studied the wrong species, in the wrong application, at the wrong dosages. But the headline spread. The context did not. Lawrence Hills anticipated this problem. His 40 years of breeding work at Bocking produced a specific solution. Bocking 14 Comfrey contains significantly lower pyrrolizidine alkaloid levels than wild species. The alkaloids concentrate primarily in roots, not leaves. Proper feeding protocol uses leaf matter, not root material. The cultivar and the method together address the safety concern that regulators raised. The guide at the end of this video explains exactly which cultivar to grow and why it matters for your pigs. The research validating Comfrey never disappeared. It simply stopped being promoted. Search agricultural databases today. You will find the Soviet feeding trials. You will find the Bocking data. You will find studies from Korean agricultural universities documenting Comfrey integration with livestock systems. The knowledge exists in scattered archives across 3 continents. In 2008, researchers at the National Institute of Animal Science in South Korea published findings on Comfrey supplementation in pig diets. Growth rates improved. Feed conversion ratios shifted favorably. The economics made sense on paper. The paper joined thousands of others that practicing farmers never see. Joel Salatin at Polyface Farm in Virginia integrated Comfrey into his pasture management system. Mark Shepard documented Comfrey in his restoration agriculture protocols across Wisconsin. Sepp Holzer grew Comfrey on his mountain farm in Austria at elevations where conventional agriculture fails. The permaculture movement rediscovered what industrial agriculture forgot. These farmers share a common observation. Pigs take to Comfrey faster than expected. Introduce it gradually over 2 weeks. Within a month, the animals recognize the sound of cutting. They come running when harvest begins. Modern small farms from Vermont to New Zealand now maintain dedicated Comfrey beds for pig supplementation. Social media groups share feeding protocols. Online nurseries sell Bocking 14 root cuttings. The knowledge is returning not because anyone is selling it, but because it works. Here is the complete protocol that farmers have used for centuries. The same system that fed pigs before the feed industry existed. Start with cultivar selection. This matters more than any other decision. Bocking 14 is a sterile hybrid. It produces no viable seed. It spreads only through root division. You control exactly where it grows. Wild Comfrey and common Comfrey self-seed aggressively and contain higher alkaloid levels. Bocking 14 was bred specifically for livestock feeding. Accept no substitutes. Source your root cuttings from reputable permaculture nurseries. Verify the cultivar before you buy. For planting, choose early spring or fall. The soil should be workable but not waterlogged. Dig holes 3 to 6 inches deep. Space plants 3 feet apart in dedicated beds. If you prefer row cultivation for mechanical management, space rows 4 feet apart. Drop 1 root cutting per hole. Cover with soil. Water thoroughly at planting. Now comes the hard part. Your first year requires patience. Do not harvest anything during the establishment season. Let the plants grow unchecked. Let them flower if they want to. Let the roots descend into the subsoil. They are building the foundation for 20 years of harvests. Cutting too early weakens the root system and reduces long-term productivity. Your patience in year 1 creates permanent infrastructure. Beginning in the second year, harvest when plants reach 2 to 3 feet in height. Use a sharp blade or sickle. Cut the stems 2 inches above ground level. Leave that stubble for regrowth. The crown will send up new shoots within days. 6 weeks later, cut again. In most temperate climates, you will harvest 4 to 5 times per season. Each cutting produces substantial biomass, and each cutting feeds your pigs. Each cutting costs you nothing but labor. Harvest. After cutting, wilt the Comfrey for 24 to 48 hours before feeding. Spread the leaves in a shaded area with good airflow. Wilting reduces moisture content from around 85% to roughly 70%. This concentrates nutrients and makes the feed easier for pigs to consume in volume. Fresh feeding works, but wilted feeding proves more practical. Wilting. For pig feeding integration, start slow. Introduce Comfrey gradually over 2 weeks. Begin at 5% of the daily ration. Increase incrementally as the pigs adapt. Maximum inclusion rate ranges from 15 to 20% of the total diet. Comfrey works best as a supplement to a balanced ration rather than a sole feed source. Slow young pigs benefit from chopped or shredded comfrey. Mature pigs handle whole leaves without difficulty. Never ferment or ensile comfrey for pigs. The fermentation process that works for ruminant feeds does not suit monogastric digestion. Fresh or wilted, never fermented. Never calculate your establishment scale based on your herd size. 10 plants provide supplemental feeding for 1 pig. 25 to 30 plants per pig enable significant diet replacement. A bed of 50 plants feeds a small homestead operation indefinitely. Do the math on feed costs over 20 years. Compare that to the price of 20 root cuttings. The numbers work in only one direction. 10. The feed industry will not tell you this. The Extension Service probably will not mention it. The agricultural university curriculum does not include it. But the plant does not care about curriculum. It cares about reproduction. It cares about growing. It cares about establishing itself wherever soil and sunlight permit. The plant. Comfrey grew in European monastery gardens during the medieval period. It fed livestock across Asia before industrial agriculture existed. It survived being ignored by the most powerful food system in human history. And it is still here, still growing, still producing 20% protein in its leaves, still returning every spring without being asked. Still, a farmer in Somerset, England, maintains a comfrey bed that his grandfather planted in 1932. 3 generations of pigs have eaten from those same roots. No replanting, no purchasing, no dependence on supply chains that can break. No. Picture your own farm 5 years from now. A established comfrey bed along the fence line. Pigs who know the sound of harvest. Feed costs reduced by 15 to 20%. Infrastructure that requires no annual input purchases. Resilience that does not depend on distant suppliers. Picture your farm 20 years from now. The same bed still producing. Your children managing the harvest. Knowledge transmitted through practice rather than purchase. Independence built into the landscape itself. 20 years. This is what self-sufficiency actually looks like. Not bunkers and freeze-dried meals. Not supplements shipped from factories across oceans. Self-sufficiency is a plant that returns every spring without asking. A plant that feeds your animals and medicines your soil and replants itself while you sleep. Self-sufficiency, what cannot be sold annually, cannot support quarterly earnings. What farmers grow themselves cannot support supply chains. Comfrey threatened the business model that modern agriculture depends on. So modern agriculture simply stopped talking about it. Comfrey. But you know now. You know the protein content matches commercial feeds. You know the root system mines minerals from depths that shallow crops cannot reach. You know the production exceeds 80 tons per acre per year. You know that Bocking 14 addresses the safety concerns that regulators raised. You know that feeding trials across 3 continents documented success. You know that you can establish permanent feed infrastructure with 20 root cuttings and 2 seasons of patience. The plant does not care about feed companies. It does not care about quarterly reports. It does not care about supply chain margins. It cares about growing, and it will be here long after supply chains are gone. Your great-grandchildren could harvest what you plant this spring. That is the only investment advice that matters. Walk into a small village in the Philippines right now. Watch the farmer in the backyard. She tears branches from a tall, slender tree with feathery leaves. She carries them to a coop where 2 dozen chickens wait. The birds rush forward, and they strip the leaves from the stems in minutes. This same scene happens across India, across Kenya, across Haiti, across Indonesia. 10 million small farmers on 4 continents feed their poultry this way. They call it the drumstick tree, the miracle tree, the tree of life. Scientists call it Moringa oleifera, and 500 million people depend on it every single week. In the United States, a backyard chicken keeper drives to the feed store. She loads 50-pound bags into her truck. She pays $18 per bag. She does this every few weeks, year after year. The global poultry feed industry generates $180 billion annually. Every dollar depends on farmers who cannot feed their animals without purchasing products. The farmer in the Philippines pays nothing. Her tree asks for nothing but sunlight and occasional water. Her grandmother planted it. Her granddaughter will harvest from it. The tree simply continues. Here is what makes moringa extraordinary for poultry. The leaves contain 27% protein by dry weight. Compare this to eggs at 13% and to the soybean meal that dominates commercial chicken feed. Soybean meal contains 44 to 48% protein, but it requires industrial processing, crushing, solvent extraction, heat treatment, transportation across oceans. The soybean cannot be fed directly to chickens from the plant. Moringa can. In 1996, researchers named Makar and Becker published a foundational study in animal feed science and technology. They analyzed the nutritional profile of moringa leaves and found something remarkable. The leaves contain all 9 essential amino acids. This makes moringa a complete protein source. Most plant proteins lack 1 or more essential amino acids. Moringa lacks nothing. The 2 amino acids that limit poultry growth are methionine and lysine. Commercial feed manufacturers add synthetic versions of these amino acids to their products. The supplements cost money. They require manufacturing facilities, quality control, and supply chains. Moringa leaves contain both methionine and lysine naturally. The tree manufactures what the industry sells. In 2010, researchers in Nigeria published a study in the International Journal of Poultry Science. They fed broiler chickens diets containing moringa leaf meal at 5%, 10%, and 15% inclusion rates. The chickens fed 10%, moringa grew at the same rate as chickens fed expensive commercial feed. The same rate. No difference in final body weight. No difference in feed conversion efficiency. The only difference was cost. A follow-up study in 2014 by researchers in the Philippines confirmed these findings. Broilers fed moringa showed equivalent performance to control groups. The scientists concluded that moringa leaf meal can replace commercial protein supplements without sacrificing production. The research exists. The evidence is clear. The knowledge sits in peer-reviewed journals that most American chicken keepers have never seen. Consider the calcium content. Moringa leaves contain 4 times more calcium than milk by weight. Calcium determines eggshell quality. Backyard chicken keepers purchase oyster shell supplements to ensure strong shells. A bag costs $8 to $12 at the feed store. Moringa provides calcium for free. The iron content reaches 3 times the concentration found in spinach. The vitamin A content supports immune function and feather quality. This is not one nutrient. This is a complete nutritional package hanging from a tree. Now consider the growth rate. The Asian Vegetable Research and Development Center documented moringa growth patterns across multiple climate zones. In tropical conditions with adequate water, moringa trees grow 3 to 5 meters in the first year. That translates to 10 to 16 feet. No other edible tree grows this fast. No other protein source regenerates this quickly. But the growth rate tells only half the story. Moringa responds to cutting by growing faster. This characteristic is called coppicing. When you harvest branches from a moringa tree, the tree responds by producing multiple new shoots from each cut point. Cut 1 branch and you get 3 branches. Cut those 3 branches and you get 9. The tree becomes more productive the more you harvest from it. This is the opposite of most crops that deplete with harvest. Coppicing changes the math for smallholders. A farmer in Kenya named James Ochieng has grown moringa for 11 years. He started with 12 seeds purchased at a local market for less than $1. Today, he maintains 47 trees that feed his entire poultry operation of 200 chickens. He has not purchased commercial feed in 9 years. His neighbors watched. They asked questions. They planted their own trees. The knowledge spread without marketing budgets or extension services. It spread because it worked. The survival characteristics explain why moringa thrives where other crops fail. The tree tolerates drought once established. It survives on as little as 10 inches of annual rainfall. The roots grow deep, accessing water that shallow-rooted crops cannot reach. In regions where climate change has made traditional farming precarious, moringa continues producing. The tree evolved in the foothills of the Himalayas, where monsoons alternate with dry seasons. It expects inconsistency. It plans for scarcity. Survival is built in. Moringa grows in poor sandy soils that would starve other crops. It tolerates slightly alkaline conditions. It asks for no fertilizer, no pesticide, no herbicide. The natural compounds in its tissues deter most insect pests. Farmers in sub-Saharan Africa plant moringa on marginal land that cannot support corn or wheat. The land that conventional agriculture abandoned becomes productive again. No inputs, just resilience. The seed production ensures permanent supply. A single mature moringa tree produces 15,000 to 25,000 seeds annually. The seeds germinate with 90% success rates. They remain viable for years when stored in dry conditions. Plant one tree in year 1. Harvest seeds in year 2. Plant 100 trees in year 3. By year 5, you have a forest. By year 10, you have a permanent feeding infrastructure that requires no annual purchases, no supply chains, no corporate dependencies. This is permanent change. So why is this tree not growing in every American backyard? Why do chicken keepers spend thousands of dollars on feed when a free alternative exists? The answer involves regulations, economics, and structural blindness that spans 2 centuries. In Australia, Moringa oleifera is listed as a restricted invasive plant under the Biosecurity Act of 2014. In Queensland, growing, selling, or transporting moringa is illegal. Penalties include substantial fines. Australian farmers who want to feed their chickens for free face criminal charges for trying. Authorities justify the ban by citing invasiveness. They claim moringa could spread uncontrollably and damage native ecosystems. This is the same justification used to restrict dozens of useful plants across many countries. But examine the evidence, and contradictions emerge. Moringa dies at the first hard frost. It cannot survive winters in most of Australia's populated regions. The tree requires tropical or subtropical conditions for year-round growth. In temperate climates, it behaves like an annual, producing abundantly for one season before cold kills it. A plant that dies every winter cannot become invasive in regions with winters. The biology contradicts the regulation. Compare moringa to plants that Australian authorities actively promoted. Prickly pear cactus was introduced deliberately and became one of Australia's worst invasive species. Lantana was sold as an ornamental and now costs millions in control efforts. Rubber vine escaped cultivation and smothers native forests. These genuinely invasive species received government support before their true nature became clear. Moringa, which has never demonstrated invasive behavior outside its native range, faces prohibition. The European Union applies different barriers. Under novel food regulations, any food not commonly consumed in Europe before 1997 requires extensive safety authorization before sale. Moringa leaves fall into that category. A farmer in France who wants to sell dried moringa leaf powder must navigate a regulatory process that costs tens of thousands of euros and takes years to complete. The rules do not ban moringa. They simply make commercial participation prohibitively expensive for small producers. The restriction pattern reveals structural logic rather than conspiracy. Moringa cannot be patented. The tree has grown for thousands of years. No company can claim ownership of its genetics. No corporation can establish exclusive rights to its cultivation. This distinguishes moringa from modern commercial crop varieties protected by intellectual property law. Consider the economics of the feed industry. $180 billion flows through this system annually. Every dollar depends on farmers who must purchase inputs, seeds, feed, supplements, medications. A self-perpetuating tree that eliminates feed purchases removes revenue from every link in the supply chain. The seed company loses sales. The feed mill loses customers. The transportation company loses freight. The retail store loses transactions. No individual in this chain conspires against moringa. Each simply responds to incentives that favor purchasable solutions over permanent ones. Research funding follows the same pattern. Search the PubMed database for studies on soybean meal in poultry nutrition, and you will find over 12,000 results. Search for moringa in poultry nutrition, and you will find fewer than 300 results. The ratio is 40-1. This disparity does not reflect scientific importance. It reflects funding sources. Soybean industry associations fund research on soybean applications. Feed companies fund research on commercial feed formulations. Universities pursue grants from available sources. Moringa has no industry association, no corporation profits from its promotion. There is no marketing budget to fund studies that would validate what 10 million farmers already know from direct experience. The historical record shows how this erasure developed. Sanskrit texts from 4,000 years ago describe moringa cultivation and medicinal uses. The ancient Egyptians pressed moringa seeds for oil used in skin treatments and preservation. Romans traded moringa oil across the Mediterranean. Every major civilization with tropical access cultivated this tree for food and medicine. The knowledge was never secret. It was simply excluded from the systems that Western science chose to recognize. In 1785, European botanists formally classified Moringa oleifera. They documented its characteristics. They noted its uses. Then they largely ignored it for 200 years. British colonial agriculture in India focused on export crops. Cotton generated revenue for textile mills. Tea satisfied consumer demand in London. Indigo produced dyes for the fashion industry. Moringa fed villagers who had nothing to sell. Colonial science studied what colonial commerce valued. Subsistence crops fell beneath official attention. After independence, developing nations received agricultural advice from Western institutions. The Green Revolution of the 1960s and the 1970s emphasized wheat, rice, and corn. High-yield varieties required purchased seeds, synthetic fertilizers, and chemical pesticides. The system boosted production while creating permanent dependencies. Indigenous tree crops like moringa appeared nowhere in the recommendations. Extension agents trained in Western programs taught Western solutions. The knowledge that had fed villages for millennia disappeared from official channels while surviving in actual practice. A document called the Dongui Bogum recorded Korean medical knowledge in 1613. It contained detailed information about dozens of plants unknown to Western medicine. The document was not translated into English until 1999. 386 years of knowledge were locked behind a language barrier. Moringa documentation in Sanskrit, Arabic, and local African languages faced similar barriers. The research existed, the translations did not. Western databases indexed Western publications. The rest remained invisible. But you can still grow this tree. The regulations that restrict moringa in Australia and complicate sales in Europe do not prevent American cultivation. Seeds from domestic sources are legal to purchase and plant. No import issues arise when buying from American growers who have already established legal stock. Moringa thrives in United States Department of Agriculture hardiness zones 9 through 11. This includes southern Florida, South Texas, southern Arizona, and southern California. In these regions, plant moringa outdoors and expect year-round growth. The tree will establish a permanent presence that requires no replanting. In zones 7 and 8, which cover much of the American South, moringa grows as a dieback perennial. The above-ground portion dies in winter. The roots survive. In spring, the tree regrows from the root system. Expect slightly smaller production than tropical regions, but still substantial harvests. In zones 4 through 6, covering most of the northern United States, moringa grows as an annual. Plant after the last frost. The tree reaches 6 to 8 feet by first frost. Harvest leaves throughout the growing season. Collect seeds before cold arrives. Replant the following spring. The tree produces abundantly even in a single season. Container cultivation extends the range further. Grow moringa in large pots. Move them indoors before frost. Place near sunny windows or under grow lights. The tree survives winter dormancy indoors and resumes growth when returned outside in spring. A greenhouse allows year-round production in any climate zone. Germination is straightforward. Soak seeds in water for 24 hours. Plant 1 inch deep in well-draining soil. Water consistently for the first 2 weeks. Seedlings emerge within 7 to 14 days. Transplant to permanent locations when seedlings reach 6 inches tall. Space trees 6 to 10 feet apart for maximum production, or plant closer for hedge-style growth that facilitates harvest. For feeding chickens, the protocol is simple. Offer fresh leaves free choice alongside regular feed. Chickens self-regulate their intake. They eat what they need and ignore the rest. Most birds consume moringa eagerly once they recognize it as food. The first few offerings may require patience as chickens learn. For more concentrated feeding, dry the leaves and grind them into meal. Mix moringa leaf meal at 10 to 20% of the total feed ration. At 10% inclusion, studies show no reduction in growth rates. At 20%, some studies show slight reductions that most backyard keepers consider acceptable given the cost savings. One mature Moringa tree, meaning a tree older than 2 years, produces enough leaf matter to supplement 6 to 12 backyard hens. A small flock requires only 3 to 5 trees to eliminate purchased protein supplements entirely. The economics are simple. One packet of seeds costs $5 to $10. The trees produce for decades. The payback period is measured in months, not years. But Moringa offers more than chicken feed. Humans eat the leaves across Asia and Africa. The young pods taste similar to green beans. The flowers are edible. The seeds, when pressed, produce oil comparable to olive oil in culinary applications. A Moringa tree feeds the whole household, not just the poultry. The water purification capacity has attracted attention from aid organizations. Crushed Moringa seeds contain proteins that function as natural coagulants. Add crushed seeds to contaminated water. The proteins bind to sediment and bacteria. The contaminants settle to the bottom. The clear water above becomes safe to drink. Researchers at the University of Leicester documented this process in peer-reviewed studies. Villages without access to water treatment plants use Moringa seeds to purify their drinking water. The tree provides clean water and protein from the same harvest. This is not merely a chicken feed solution. This is survival infrastructure. A Moringa grove provides protein, vegetables, cooking oil, water purification, and animal feed from a single planting. In any scenario where supply chains fail, where stores close, where industrial systems collapse, the trees continue producing. They ask nothing from the systems that have failed. They simply grow. The question was never whether Moringa works. 10 million farmers already know it works. Peer-reviewed research confirms it works. 4,000 years of documentation demonstrate it works. The question is why Western agricultural systems failed to notice. Why $180 billion flows through the feed industry while a free alternative grows across 4 continents. Why Australian farmers face prosecution for planting a tree that could eliminate their feed costs forever. Yay! The answer is not conspiracy. The answer is structure. Economic systems see what benefits economic systems. Research follows funding. Funding follows patents. Patents require control over what is sold. Moringa cannot be controlled. It self-seeds. It spreads. It coppices. It regenerates. It becomes permanent. What cannot be controlled cannot generate recurring revenue. What cannot generate recurring revenue does not receive marketing budgets. What receives no marketing does not enter public consciousness. 3 generations of Western farmers raised chickens' eyes without ever hearing the word Moringa. Not because anyone hid it, because no one profited from revealing it. But you know now. You know the fastest growing edible tree exists. You know it contains 27% complete protein. You know 10 million farmers already use it. You know the regulations that restrict it serve systems rather than people. You know seeds are legal to purchase and plant. You know 3 trees can eliminate your feed bill. The feed industry will not tell you. The extension services will not tell you. The nurseries selling you ornamental trees will not tell you. They have no incentive to tell you. Their revenue depends on your continued purchasing. But the tree does not care about revenue. The tree cares about reproduction. It cares about spreading its seeds. It cares about establishing itself wherever sunlight reaches soil. For 4,000 years, Moringa has pursued this agenda across every continent where tropical climates permit. It will continue for 4,000 more. The only question is whether you become part of that expansion or continue purchasing what a tree would give you for free. Walk into any Vietnamese restaurant tonight. Watch the table next to you. They will be eating a stir-fried green with hollow stems that crunch between their teeth. This is not bok choy. This is not spinach. This is rau muong, water spinach, and it appears in more Asian meals than any other single vegetable. In Vietnam, they consider it the national vegetable. 60% of home-cooked meals include it. Mothers stir-fry it with garlic in the time it takes to boil rice. Street vendors sell it from carts at every corner in Ho Chi Minh City. The dish costs less than $1 and delivers more nutrition than most Western salads. In China, they call it Kong Shin Kai. The name translates to hollow heart vegetable. The hollow stems are not a defect. They are a feature. They allow the plant to do something almost no other vegetable can do. But we will get to that. In Thailand, they call it pak bung. Street food vendors cook it in round bottom woks over flames so intense the dish finishes in under 60 seconds. The technique is called pad pak bung phai daeng, stir-fried water spinach with fire. Tourists line up to watch the flames shoot 3 feet into the air. They do not realize they are watching the preparation of one of the most nutritious vegetables on earth. In the Philippines, they call it kangkong. In Indonesia, kangkung. In Malaysia, the dish kangkung belacan has become an unofficial national treasure. Shrimp paste, chilies, and water spinach combine into something that appears on tables from fishing villages to 5-star hotels. Here is the first clue that something went wrong in the West. You know bok choy, you know Thai basil, you know lemongrass. These appear in Western grocery stores, in cooking shows, in meal delivery kits. Water spinach, consumed by more people than all those combined, barely exists in Western consciousness. Most Americans have never heard the name. The problem begins with fragmentation. Koreans call it something different. Japanese call it something different. Vietnamese, Chinese, Thai, Filipino, Indonesian, Malaysian, 8 names across 8 countries. No unified Western identity. When a plant has no consistent name, it has no shelf space, no cookbook presence, no research funding identity. The fragmentation was not intentional, but the result was erasure. Compare this to cilantro, same plant as coriander, different name for leaves versus seeds. But Western food culture unified these names. Everyone knows cilantro. It appears in every grocery store. Water spinach never received this unification. It remained foreign in each separate encounter. Never familiar, never integrated, never understood. But here is what makes water spinach different from every other vegetable you have never heard of. It does not need soil. It evolved to grow in water, and what that means for anyone with a windowsill is revolutionary. Water spinach evolved in the Mekong Delta. Picture the landscape, a river system that floods for 6 months every year. Water everywhere, soil submerged beneath brown currents. Most plants would drown. Most plants did drown. But water spinach faced a choice: adapt or disappear. It adapted. The hollow stems you see when you cut water spinach are not empty space. They are parenchyma tissue, specialized air channels that transport oxygen from leaves to submerged roots. Most plants die in standing water within days because roots need oxygen and waterlogged soil contains none. Water spinach solved this problem 10,000 years ago. The plant breathes through its stems. Air enters through the leaves, travels down the hollow channels, and reaches the roots underwater. The plant carries its own atmosphere wherever it grows. Daniel Austin documented this adaptation in his 2007 research published in Economic Botany. The parenchyma tissue occupies 60% of the stem cross-section. No other commonly eaten vegetable possesses this architecture. The plant is engineered by evolution for exactly what the title promises: growth in nothing but water. What this means practically is profound. Soil is not required. Soil is not even preferred. Research from Pallotta and Crossman, published in 1999, documented that water spinach grows faster, cleaner, and often more nutritiously in water-only systems than in traditional soil cultivation. The vitamins concentrate more efficiently when the plant does what evolution designed it to do. Then there is the speed. Westphal and Jansen measured growth rates in Southeast Asian cultivation trials, 10 to 15 centimeters per day. Per day. No other edible plant approaches this velocity. A cutting placed in water on Monday morning shows visible growth by Tuesday afternoon. By Friday, you have harvestable leaves. By the following Friday, you have harvestable leaves again. The speed borders on absurd. But growth speed is only half the story. What happens when you cut this plant explains why a single purchase can feed you forever. When you cut most plants, they weaken, they redirect energy to healing the wound, and they slow their growth while recovering from damage. When you cut water spinach, it multiplies. This is meristematic biology documented in peer-reviewed research. Every node on a water spinach stem contains dormant lateral buds. These nodes are the bumpy joints where leaves attach. Inside each node, sleeping buds wait for a signal. When you cut the main stem, you send that signal. Hormone distribution shifts within hours. Auxin, the growth hormone that keeps lateral buds dormant, redistributes away from the nodes. The dormant buds activate within 24 to 48 hours. Where one stem existed, 2 emerge. Cut those 2 stems, 4 emerge. The multiplication continues with every harvest. Edie and Ho tracked this phenomenon in their 1969 study, published in Economic Botany. They followed single stem cuttings through Malaysian growing trials. One cutting produced 15 sequential harvests. Not 15 leaves, but 15 complete harvests of substantial edible material. The same cutting regrew month after month until the researchers stopped counting. James Stephens expanded this research in his 1994 publication in Hort Science. He documented the hormone mechanics in precise detail. The meristematic tissue concentrated at each node contains pluripotent cells capable of differentiating into stems, roots, or leaves, depending on environmental signals. Cut the stem and these cells receive the signal to become new stems. The plant treats every wound as an opportunity. Think about what this means for your grocery bill. Lettuce, buy it, use it, throw away the inedible core, buy again next week. Spinach, buy it, use it, watch the remainder wilt in your refrigerator, buy again. Kale, arugula, mixed greens. The same cycle repeats endlessly. Purchase, consumption, waste, repeat purchase. The produce industry depends on this cycle. Supermarkets depend on this cycle. Your repeated trips to the store depend on this cycle. Water spinach breaks this cycle completely. One purchase, infinite consumption, no repeat purchase necessary. The economics should concern anyone who profits from selling you vegetables. Vietnamese floating markets have operated on this regenerative principle for centuries. Picture the scene: wooden boats crowded together on brown river water at dawn. Farmers selling produce directly from their vessels. A farmer cuts water spinach and hands it to a customer. The remaining stems sit in water on the boat deck. During the trip back to the farm, those stems begin regenerating. By the next market day, harvestable material returns. The crop perpetuates itself between sales. No replanting required. No new seeds purchased. The same stems produce food, generation after generation. So you have a plant that grows in water, regrows when cut, and propagates indefinitely from a single purchase. But what exactly are you eating? The nutritional analysis answers questions you did not know to ask. Water spinach contains 2.5 milligrams of iron per 100 grams of fresh weight. Standard spinach, the regular Popeye approved variety, contains 2.7 milligrams per 100 grams. Nearly identical numbers on paper, but here is what nutritionists understand that marketing departments ignore. Spinach iron comes bundled with oxalates. These compounds bind to iron in your digestive system and block absorption. Your body passes most spinach iron without ever using it. Research published by Iguinay in 2011 in the International Science Research Journal found that water spinach iron bioavailability was 40% higher than terrestrial spinach. Lower oxalate content means less interference. You absorb more iron from water spinach than from the vegetable named after iron absorption. Popeye chose poorly. The vitamin A numbers reveal a similar story. Water spinach contains 6,300 international units per 100 grams. Carrots contain 8,350 international units per 100 grams. Carrots win on paper, but consider the full picture. Carrots require soil. Carrots require months of underground growth. Carrots require purchase at every use because carrots do not regrow when you cut them. Water spinach regenerates in water every 2 weeks. The vitamin A per dollar spent is incomparable. The vitamin A per effort expended is incomparable. The vitamin A per trip to the grocery store does not even have a comparison. Vitamin C measurement adds another dimension. Water spinach contains 55 milligrams per 100 grams. An orange contains 53 milligrams per 100 grams. Read those numbers again. The vegetable and the fruit are nutritionally equivalent for vitamin C. But oranges do not regrow in water bottles on your windowsill. Oranges require orchards that take years to mature. They require global shipping infrastructure moving fruit across oceans. They require refrigerated transport burning fuel to keep produce fresh. Water spinach requires a cup and sunlight. The USDA Food Data Central Database confirms additional nutrients most people never consider: calcium at 77 milligrams per 100 grams, potassium at 312 milligrams per 100 grams, folate at 57 micrograms per 100 grams. That folate number matters profoundly. Folate is the vitamin most critical during pregnancy, most often supplemented, and most expensive in synthetic form. Doctors prescribe folate supplements to pregnant women worldwide. The supplement industry profits from every prescription. Water spinach grows folate in water bottles for free. The global vitamin supplement market generates $150 billion annually as of 2024. Americans alone spend $35 billion on vitamins each year. Iron supplements in brown bottles, vitamin A capsules in orange packaging, vitamin C tablets in citrus-flavored chewables. Each product requires manufacturing facilities, encapsulation machinery, quality control testing, packaging lines, warehouse storage, and shipping logistics. Retail markup occurs at every step. The complexity creates jobs and generates profits across multiple industries. Water spinach threatens this entire supply chain. One plant contains iron, vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, potassium, and folate. One plant regrows indefinitely. One plant requires zero repeat purchase. A product that replaces itself cannot generate recurring revenue. A vitamin source that multiplies when cut cannot sustain quarterly earnings growth. The economics explain the obscurity better than any conspiracy theory. The nutrition facts alone justify growing this plant, but the medicinal research explains why traditional healers have prescribed it for 2,000 years. In 2000, a researcher named Malala Vidani published findings in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology that startled the scientific community. Water spinach leaves contain insulin-like peptides, not insulin itself, but compounds that function through similar mechanisms. Laboratory trials using diabetic rat models showed a 30% blood glucose reduction from water spinach consumption. The pharmaceutical industry generates billions selling drugs designed to achieve exactly this effect. Water spinach achieves it in a stir-fry. Chen and colleagues expanded this research in their 2010 publication, also in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology. They documented chlorogenic acid content at 12.4 milligrams per gram of dry weight. Chlorogenic acid protects liver cells from toxic damage. The concentration in water spinach exceeds coffee, the source most Westerners associate with this compound. Every morning, millions of people drink coffee, partly for chlorogenic acid benefits. Water spinach delivers more of the compound per gram than the beverage they depend on. The Food and Agriculture Organization documented traditional uses in their 1999 publication on aquatic vegetables of Southeast Asia. Chinese medicine has prescribed water spinach for digestive complaints since 300 BCE. That is over 2,300 years of continuous medicinal application. Generation after generation of healers reaching for the same plant to treat the same conditions. Mitra's 2007 research, published in Pharmaceutical Biology, finally explained the mechanism. Water spinach contains specific laxative compounds that traditional healers identified through observation millennia before gas chromatography existed. The science validated what grandmothers already knew. The plant works. It has always worked. Western medicine simply never looked closely enough to understand why. Hamid's 2011 systematic review compiled evidence across dozens of studies from universities throughout Asia. Anti-inflammatory properties were confirmed, antioxidant capacity was measured, antimicrobial effects were documented. The same plant, the same leaves, the same vegetable you can grow in a water bottle on your windowsill offers those benefits while the pharmaceutical industry sells isolated compounds in expensive packaging. Search PubMed for water spinach, medicinal properties, and you will find approximately 200 studies. Search for aspirin, and you will find over 50,000. This disparity does not reflect effectiveness, it reflects funding. Aspirin has pharmaceutical companies sponsoring research. Water spinach has centuries of traditional use and emerging research from Asian institutions that Western databases historically under-indexed. So why can you not buy this at Walmart? Why does every American grocery store not stock it between the lettuce and the kale? The answer reveals something uncomfortable about how food systems decide what you are allowed to eat. In 1999, the United States Department of Agriculture added water spinach to the federal noxious weed list. The same plant that 1 billion people eat weekly became illegal to transport across state lines without permits. The classification seems absurd until you understand the reasoning behind it. Water spinach survival adaptations create regulatory nightmares. The same characteristics that make it perfect for home growing make it terrifying for waterway management. It grows 10 to 15 centimeters per day. It propagates from any stem fragment that contacts water. It tolerates flooding, drought, and pollution that would kill other plants. Picture this vegetable released into Florida canal systems. It would spread uncontrollably. Native aquatic ecosystems would face a competitor evolved for exactly these conditions over 10,000 years. Holmes' 1997 reference work titled World Weeds, Natural Histories and Distribution classified water spinach as the 8th worst aquatic weed on Earth. The same page noted it was Asia's most important leafy vegetable. The plant is too good at surviving. Its resilience is simultaneously its virtue for home growers and its regulatory crime for environmental agencies. The paradox could not be more stark. A vegetable eaten by 1 billion people weekly, banned from interstate commerce in America, not because it harms humans who eat it, because it might harm ecosystems if it escapes cultivation. The government accidentally identified the perfect survival food and classified it as a threat, but loopholes exist. Florida, Texas, and Hawaii issue cultivation permits. Asian grocery stores in major cities stock freshwater spinach under various legal arrangements. H-Mart locations carry it regularly. 99 Ranch Market stocks it in the produce section. Local Vietnamese and Chinese markets in cities with significant Asian populations keep it available for communities that never stopped eating it. The plant is not impossible to obtain. It is merely bureaucratically complicated in some states. And once you obtain it legally, what happens in your own home is your own business. Now you understand what this plant is. Now you understand why you have not heard of it. Here is how you grow it anyway. Visit an Asian grocery store, H-Mart, 99 Ranch, or your local Vietnamese market. Look for Kong Kong, Ong Choi, or water spinach on the signage. Buy the freshest bunch available. Stems should be firm and crisp, not wilted or slimy. Spend $2 or $3 maximum. This is your last purchase. At home, cut stems to 6 to 8 inches in length. Examine each cutting and ensure it has at least 2 nodes. These are the bumpy joints where leaves attach to the stem. The nodes contain the meristematic tissue that generates new growth. No nodes means no regeneration. Remove lower leaves that would sit below the water line. Submerged leaves rot and contaminate the water. Clean stems below, leaves above. The division is simple. Place cuttings in a clear water bottle or glass jar. Wide-mouth containers work better than narrow necks. Fill with water to cover the bottom 2 to 3 inches of stem. The nodes should be submerged, but upper leaves should remain above water. Use a bottle that lets you see the roots. Position the container on a windowsill, receiving 4 or more hours of sunlight daily. Southern exposure works best in the northern hemisphere. Water spinach tolerates lower light conditions, but grows faster with more sun. The parenchyma tissue evolved under tropical intensity. Give it what it wants. Change the fresh water every 2 to 3 days. Stagnant water breeds bacteria and algae. Fresh water keeps the system clean and delivers dissolved oxygen to developing roots. This is the only maintenance required. Roots emerge within 1 week. You will see white threads extending from submerged nodes. These are water roots, different from soil roots, adapted for aquatic nutrient absorption. Their appearance confirms successful establishment. New leaf growth appears within 2 weeks. The stems elongate toward the light. Fresh leaves unfurl from growing tips. The plant has accepted its new home. Harvest by cutting above a node with clean scissors or a sharp knife. Always leave at least 2 nodes below your cut. These remaining nodes will activate dormant buds and produce new stems within days. Cut too low and you remove the regeneration capacity. Cut above the nodes and the cycle continues indefinitely. 1 grocery store purchase, 1 water bottle, unlimited vitamins, growing on your windowsill. No soil required. No fertilizer needed, no expertise demanded, just water, light, and the biology of a plant that evolved 10,000 years ago to do exactly this. The supplement companies will not tell you about this. The grocery chains profit from your repeated purchases. The pharmaceutical industry prefers you buy their manufactured alternatives. But the plant does not care about profit margins or market share or quarterly earnings reports. Water spinach cares about one thing: growing. It has grown across Asia for millennia. It has fed 1 billion people this week alone. It has waited patiently in Asian grocery stores for anyone curious enough to take a cutting home. Now you know. Now you can grow free vitamins in a water bottle on your windowsill. Now you understand why this knowledge remained hidden from Western consumers while Asian grandmothers have practiced it for generations. Walk into any pharmacy today. The supplement aisle displays calcium tablets priced at $15 to $30 per bottle. Caltrate, Citracol, Nature Made. These companies spend millions convincing consumers that laboratory formulations deliver superior bone health. Shoppers fill their carts, trusting that processed pills outperform anything growing in their backyards. They never question whether soldiers treating shattered bones in muddy field hospitals discovered something better 80 years ago. Stinging nettle grows on every continent except Antarctica. The plant reaches 4 feet tall in fertile soil, and it spreads through underground rhizomes that survive winter freezing. Most people recognize it through childhood pain. A brushed ankle in tall grass, or a grabbed handful while playing in overgrown lots. The burning sensation that follows contact can last for hours, and it creates memories that persist for decades. The sting mechanism operates through microscopic hollow hairs covering every leaf and stem. These structures, called trichomes, function like hypodermic needles. When skin contacts the plant, the hair tips break off and inject a chemical mixture directly into the tissue. Histamine triggers immediate inflammation. Acetylcholine amplifies nerve signals. Formic acid, the same compound fire ants deploy, creates the sustained burning sensation. This defense system evolved over millions of years for one purpose: protection. The same chemistry that drives humans away also repels insects and grazing animals. The plant invests enormous biological resources into these defensive compounds. That investment protected something valuable enough to justify the cost. Monastery records from the 9th century in Europe document what that value was. Benedictine monks at the Abbey of St. Gall in modern Switzerland maintained detailed garden plans showing nettle cultivation alongside medicinal herbs. The monks were not growing weeds by accident. They were cultivating a food source that sustained communities through winters when stored grain ran low. John Gerard published the Herbal in 1597, documenting English botanical knowledge accumulated over generations. His entry on nettle describes the plant as nourishing beyond measure in famine conditions. Gerard recorded that Scottish Highlanders survived harsh winters by harvesting nettle from sheltered valleys when other food sources failed completely. Irish records from the Great Famine of 1845 through 1852 show similar patterns. Families who knew traditional foraging methods incorporated nettle into soups and porridges when potato crops rotted in the fields. The plant grew abundantly in the same disturbed soils, where desperate farmers had torn up failed crops searching for anything edible. The British Ministry of Food issued official pamphlets during World War I encouraging civilians to harvest wild nettle. The documents archived at the Imperial War Museum in London describe collection methods and recipes designed to supplement ration diets. Government botanists understood that the plant growing along railway embankments and bomb craters contained nutrients that imported food could not provide. German military medical records from World War II contain the most detailed documentation. Field hospitals along the Eastern Front faced chronic supply shortages. Medical officers experimented with local food sources to support patient recovery. Dr. Heinrich Vogt, stationed near Stalingrad in 1943, observed that patients receiving nettle-based nutrition showed faster bone healing compared to control groups. His reports traveled through military medical channels to research facilities in Munich and Berlin. Laboratory analysis confirmed what field observation suggested. The plant contained calcium concentrations exceeding dairy products by factors that seemed impossible for a wild species. The research continued until Allied bombing disrupted German scientific infrastructure in 1944. After the war, this knowledge dispersed without systematic preservation. Agricultural extension services in Europe and North America focused reconstruction efforts on industrial farming methods. Governments needed to rebuild national food production quickly. Industrial methods required purchased inputs, fertilizers from chemical factories, seeds from commercial suppliers, and equipment from manufacturers. These purchases generated economic activity that helped fund post-war recovery. The self-sustaining, foraging knowledge passed down through generations generated no revenue for agricultural suppliers. Grandparents who remembered which wild plants fed families through hard times found their knowledge dismissed as primitive. Their grandchildren learned to buy vegetables wrapped in plastic from supermarket shelves. The chain of transmission broke within a single generation. The plant that fed Europe through every famine became classified as a noxious weed requiring elimination. County extension offices published guides for chemical eradication. Gardeners sprayed herbicides along fence lines where nettle appeared. The most nutritious food source in the temperate world became an enemy to destroy rather than a resource to harvest. But the scientific evidence never disappeared. It accumulated in peer-reviewed journals that most consumers never encounter. Researchers continued analyzing nettle composition using increasingly sophisticated laboratory methods. The findings confirm everything historical records suggested and reveal additional benefits that medieval monks could not have measured. Ruto and colleagues published a comprehensive nutritional analysis in Hort Science in 2013. Their laboratory work at the University of Kentucky measured mineral content in nettle leaves grown under controlled conditions. The calcium numbers exceeded expectations, 481 milligrams per 100 grams of dry weight. The same measurement for whole milk shows 125 milligrams. The ratio calculates to 3.8 times more calcium in nettle than in the dairy product that marketing campaigns promote as the superior bone-building food. The bioavailability question matters as much as raw content. Calcium locked in chemical compounds that human digestion cannot break down provides no nutritional benefit regardless of concentration. Roy Upton addressed this question in the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia monograph, published in 2013. His analysis of absorption studies showed nettle calcium entering the bloodstream at 40% efficiency. Dairy calcium absorbs at 30%. The plant delivers more calcium per serving, and the body accesses a higher percentage of what it delivers. 1 cup of cooked nettle provides more absorbable calcium than 2 glasses of milk. The mathematics are not complicated. They simply contradict 50 years of dairy industry marketing that most consumers accepted without question. Skeptics raise an obvious objection. People drink milk in liquid form. Who consumes dried nettle? The answer involves basic food chemistry. Cooking nettle in water for 60 seconds completely neutralizes the sting mechanism. Heat denatures the proteins in trichomes and breaks down the chemical irritants. The resulting cooked greens taste similar to spinach, with a slightly stronger mineral flavor. Every traditional nettle recipe, from the Scottish Highlands to German field hospitals, begins with brief cooking that transforms a painful weed into a palatable vegetable. The protein content surprised researchers as much as the calcium findings. Adhikari and colleagues published analysis in Food Chemistry in 2016, documenting protein concentration at 25 to 30% of dry weight. Context makes this number meaningful. Spinach contains 2.9% protein. Kale contains 4.3%. Soybeans, the foundation of plant-based protein products, contain 36%. Nettle approaches soybean levels while growing as an unwanted weed rather than a carefully cultivated crop. Amino acid profile analysis published by Rafajlovska in 2013 confirmed nutritional completeness. Human bodies require 9 essential amino acids that internal chemistry cannot synthesize. These must come from dietary sources. Animal products typically provide complete amino acid profiles. Most plant foods lack one or more essential components. Nettle leaves contain all 9 essential amino acids in proportions that support human protein synthesis without supplementation. Medieval populations who survived protein scarcity through nettle consumption were not lucky. They were accessing a complete protein source that modern nutrition science would not fully characterize for another 8 centuries. The knowledge worked. The explanation came later. Iron content presents another contradiction to mainstream nutrition education. Every child who watched cartoons in the 1970s learned that spinach builds strength through iron content. Popeye squeezed cans and grew instant muscles. The image persists in cultural memory decades after nutritional science complicated the story. Fresh spinach contains 2.7 milligrams of iron per 100 grams. Nettle contains 1.64 milligrams per 100 grams fresh. The numbers seem comparable until methodology differences emerge. Dried nettle concentrates to 41 milligrams per 100 grams. More importantly, the oxalate compounds in spinach bind iron molecules into forms that human digestion cannot absorb. Studies show that spinach iron passes through the digestive system largely untouched. Nettle contains lower oxalate concentrations. The iron molecules remain available for absorption into the bloodstream. Practical nutritional value depends on what the body can actually use rather than what laboratory analysis measures in raw samples. Vitamin K content adds another dimension. USDA Food Data Central databases show nettle providing 498 micrograms per 100 grams. Adult daily requirements fall between 90 and 120 micrograms. A single serving exceeds requirements by 400%. Vitamin K enables calcium deposition into the bone matrix. The combination of high calcium and high vitamin K in a single food source explains the accelerated bone healing that German military physicians observed in field hospital patients. The question becomes obvious once the data accumulates. Why does a plant that humans classify as a worthless weed contain more nutrition than crops that farmers cultivate carefully and consumers pay premium prices to purchase? The answer involves evolutionary pressure and agricultural history. Wild plants face constant survival challenges. Insects attack leaves. Animals graze stems. Pathogens invade tissues. Survival requires investment in defensive compounds and concentrated nutrients that support rapid tissue repair. Plants that cannot defend themselves and heal quickly do not reproduce successfully. Natural selection over millions of years concentrated beneficial compounds in species that survived. Cultivated crops face different selection pressures. Humans chose plants for characteristics that benefited farmers and merchants rather than consumers. Larger fruits attracted buyers at markets. Sweeter flavors please palates accustomed to sugar. Durable skins survived transport over long distances. Seeds that germinated uniformly simplified planting schedules. None of these selection criteria correlated with nutritional density. Researchers at the University of Texas published findings in the Journal of the American College of Nutrition documenting nutrient decline in commercial produce over 50 years. Modern tomatoes contain 60% less vitamin C than varieties grown in 1950. Broccoli calcium content dropped by half. The crops that fill supermarket shelves look impressive and taste acceptable while delivering diminished nutritional value with each passing decade. Nettle never underwent commercial selection. No seed company bred varieties for supermarket distribution. No agricultural extension service promoted cultivation methods optimized for mechanical harvest. The plant retained its original nutritional density because no economic force existed to breed it away. The same characteristic that prevented commercialization preserved the nutritional value that commercial crops lost. Greger and Landberg published research in Environmental Pollution in 2015 demonstrating additional nettle capabilities. The plant accumulates heavy metals from contaminated soils through a process called phytoremediation. Zinc and copper concentrate in root tissues while remaining absent from edible leaves. Nettle thrives in disturbed and polluted sites precisely because it evolved mechanisms to process soil contaminants that poison other vegetation. This explains why nettle appears abundantly in abandoned lots, former industrial sites, and roadsides where car exhaust settled for decades. The plant grows where agriculture degraded land because its biology handles conditions that cultivated crops cannot tolerate. The weed designation reflects human failure to recognize adaptation as valuable rather than any deficiency in the plant itself. Vogel and Hartle published agricultural research in the American Journal of Alternative Agriculture in 2023, documenting production potential. Nettle biomass reaches 10 to 15 tons of dry matter per hectare annually. This yield exceeds alfalfa, which farmers cultivate as the gold standard for biomass production. Nettle achieves these numbers without nitrogen fertilizer inputs because the plant accesses soil nitrogen through mechanisms that domesticated crops lack. DiVirgilio and colleagues confirmed establishment characteristics in industrial crops and products in 2015. Seeds germinate in 10 to 14 days under standard conditions. Plants reach harvestable size 8 weeks after emergence. Root systems persist 5 to 7 years once established. A single planting produces continuous harvests across multiple growing seasons without replanting costs or annual soil preparation. The economics of cultivation border on absurdity. Commercial calcium supplements cost $15 to $30 per month for consumers who take them daily. Annual expenditure reaches $180 to $360 per year for a single mineral that grows freely in backyard conditions. Milk purchases for equivalent calcium delivery cost approximately $180 per year at current retail prices. The plant that provides superior calcium at zero ongoing cost grows faster than gardeners can harvest it. Establishment requires minimal investment. Root divisions from existing patches cost nothing if you know someone willing to share. Online nurseries sell starter plants for $8 to $12. Seed packets containing hundreds of seeds retail for $3 to $5. A 10-square-foot patch produces 20 or more pounds of fresh greens annually once established. Health food stores price dried nettle at $12 to $18 per pound. The backyard patch generates $200 or more in equivalent retail value from plants that require no fertilizer and no irrigation beyond natural rainfall. Site selection follows simple principles. Nettle tolerates conditions that kill commercial vegetables. Partial shade where lawn grass struggles becomes ideal nettle habitat. Poorly drained corners where water pools after rain create exactly the moist conditions the plant prefers. The spots that frustrate conventional gardeners become productive nettle plots without soil amendment or drainage improvement. Planting technique requires no special knowledge. Root divisions spaced 12 inches apart and covered 2 inches deep establish within weeks. Water once after planting, then ignore it completely. The plant evolved to survive without human assistance. Providing careful attention offers no benefit and wastes gardening effort better directed elsewhere. First harvest begins when plants reach 12 inches tall. Cut the top 4 to 6 inches of each stem using scissors or pruning shears. The sting neutralizes within seconds of cutting as trichomes lose hydraulic pressure. Handling fresh cut nettle with bare hands causes no discomfort after 30 seconds exposure to air. Gloves provide psychological comfort but no practical necessity for harvested material. Processing for consumption takes 60 seconds. Drop cut nettle into boiling water. Wait 1 minute. Remove and drain. The heat destroys sting compounds completely and permanently. Cooked nettle stores in refrigerators for 1 week or freezers for 6 months. Dried nettle keeps indefinitely in sealed containers away from light and moisture. Traditional recipes span every European culinary tradition. Scottish nettle soup combines the greens with potatoes and onions into a hearty broth. Italian nettle risotto substitutes the leaves for spinach with a stronger mineral flavor. German nettle dumplings mix blanched leaves into potato dough before boiling. Every recipe that calls for cooked spinach accepts nettle substitution with enhanced nutritional delivery. Modern applications extend beyond traditional cooking. Nettle powder adds to smoothies without detectable flavor change. Dried leaves steep into tea that provides mineral supplementation in drinkable form. Capsules filled with dried nettle powder replicate the supplement industry model using backyard production rather than factory manufacturing. Continuous harvest through the growing season requires only repeated cutting. Each harvest stimulates regrowth from the root system. Plants cut in early spring produce new growth within 2 weeks. Cutting every 3 to 4 weeks maintains steady production from last frost through first frost. A single established patch provides fresh nettle for 8 months and dried nettle for the remaining 4 months. The German military physician whose findings disappeared into archives was not given access to secret knowledge. He was given desperation that forced attention to resources growing freely around destroyed infrastructure. The same conditions exist today in a different form. Rising supplement prices and declining produce nutrition create circumstances where rediscovering traditional knowledge provides practical benefit. Agricultural extension services have no commercial incentive to promote plants that grow without purchased inputs. The funding structures that support public education about farming connect directly to companies selling seeds, fertilizers, and equipment. Nettle cultivation generates no revenue for these suppliers. The knowledge remains buried not through conspiracy, but through economic structures that reward some information and ignore other information regardless of value to consumers. The peer-reviewed research sits in university libraries accessible to anyone willing to search. The historical records fill archives open to public access. The plants grow along roadsides, in abandoned lots, and at the edges of parking areas throughout the temperate world. Every gardener who pulls nettle and bags it for disposal removes the highest calcium food source that grows in their climate. The monks at St. Gall understood something that modern consumers forgot. The soldiers in field hospitals rediscovered something that peacetime prosperity obscured. The science confirms what traditional knowledge preserved. The most nutritious food requires no purchase, no cultivation, and no attention beyond recognizing value.
Walk into any health food store today, you will find shelves dedicated to protein powders extracted from peas and processed in factories. You will find magnesium supplements shipped from facilities across oceans. You will find products promising complete amino acid profiles at premium prices. Meanwhile, a single grain delivers all of this from a plant that returns every spring without permission. The numbers do not lie. Per 100 grams of uncooked grain, this plant delivers 248 milligrams of magnesium. That represents 59% of your daily requirement in a single serving. Now consider spinach, the vegetable that Western nutrition celebrates as the gold standard for magnesium. Raw spinach contains 79 milligrams per 100 grams. The difference is not marginal. The difference is fundamental. But magnesium is just the beginning. This grain contains 7.6 milligrams of iron per 100 grams. That covers 42% of your daily iron needs. The calcium content rivals dairy. The fiber content exceeds most whole grains. And the protein story changes everything you thought you knew about plant nutrition. For decades, nutritionists repeated a simple claim: plant proteins are incomplete. They lack essential amino acids. You need to combine foods carefully or eat animal products to get complete nutrition. This grain destroys that narrative entirely. Researchers analyzing this grain found all 9 essential amino acids present: histidine, isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, valine. Every single amino acid your body cannot produce on its own exists in this grain. Scientists measured its biological value at 75, closer to perfect than any other grain protein ever tested. The lysine content alone rewrites the rules. Lysine is the amino acid most commonly deficient in cereal grains. It plays critical roles in calcium absorption, collagen production, and immune function. This grain contains 5.3 to 6.3% lysine in its protein. That is roughly twice the lysine content of wheat and 3 times that of maize. The grain that feeds billions worldwide cannot match what this forgotten crop delivers. And yet there is more. The leaves of this plant contain more than twice the antioxidants of spinach, more polyphenols than kale. Both the grain and the greens are edible, meaning one plant provides 2 distinct food sources from a single planting. The question forms naturally: if this grain outperforms spinach in magnesium, rivals meat in protein quality, and provides more antioxidants than celebrated superfoods, why have most people in the Western world never heard of it? The answer requires traveling back 8,000 years. In the highlands of Oaxaca, Mexico, ancient peoples first cultivated this grain between 8,000 and 10,000 years ago. The Mayans recognized its value and passed the knowledge forward through generations. But it was the Aztec Empire that elevated this crop to something approaching sacred status. By 1400, the Aztec Empire had codified this grain as one of 3 mandatory tribute crops. 17 provinces across the empire were required to send annual tribute to the capital city of Tenochtitlan. The quantity was staggering. 20,000 tons of this grain flowed into the imperial capital every single year. Picture the great marketplaces of Tenochtitlan. Spanish conquistadors who witnessed these markets described them as larger and more organized than any in Europe. In the grain sections, this crop occupied prominent space alongside maize and beans. Farmers brought it from villages across the empire. Merchants traded it by the basket. Families ground it into flour for daily meals. But the grain served purposes beyond simple nutrition. During festivals honoring Huitzilopochtli, the Aztec god of war, priests performed elaborate ceremonies that terrified Spanish observers. They mixed the grain flour with honey and sometimes with sacrificial blood to form a dough called soali. Artisans sculpted this dough into figures representing their gods. Priests paraded these figures through the streets of Tenochtitlan while thousands watched. Then the figures were broken apart, and the people ate them. This ritual proved catastrophic for the grain's future. In 1519, Hernán Cortés arrived on the coast of Mexico with roughly 500 soldiers. Within 2 years, the Aztec Empire would collapse. And with its fall came a systematic campaign of cultural destruction that specifically targeted this grain. The Spanish conquistadors and the Catholic Church viewed the Tzoali ceremonies with horror. To their eyes, indigenous people were creating idols of their gods and consuming them in a ritual that looked disturbingly similar to Catholic communion. This was blasphemy of the highest order. The response was swift and brutal. Colonial authorities banned cultivation of this grain outright. They burned fields where it grew. They issued decrees making its production illegal across the conquered territories. And for those who defied the ban, the punishment was severe. Growing this grain could result in having your hands cut off. Some faced execution. Consider what this reveals about the grain's importance. The Spanish did not ban maize. They did not ban beans. They did not systematically destroy cacao, despite its role in Aztec rituals. They chose to eliminate specifically this grain precisely because of its sacred significance to indigenous culture. Colonial administrators understood something that modern historians sometimes miss. Depriving a population of a sacred food weakens that population spiritually and physically. Aztec warriors ate this grain before battle for strength. Priests used it in ceremonies that bound communities together. By eliminating the grain, the Spanish eliminated a pillar of indigenous identity. The campaign nearly succeeded. Across central Mexico, cultivation of this grain dropped to almost nothing. Farmers who had grown it for generations stopped planting. Fields that had produced 20,000 tons annually fell silent. But the grain had one advantage that empire could not overcome. It grows like a weed. In the remote mountains of Oaxaca, far from Spanish colonial centers, indigenous communities continued cultivating this grain in secret. The Mayans, whose territories remained partially outside Spanish control, maintained their crops. And in fields across the former Aztec Empire, the grain volunteered itself. Even when no one planted it, seeds from previous harvests germinated in disturbed soil. The plant that empire tried to destroy kept returning. For nearly 500 years, this grain existed in shadows. Spanish colonial records ignored it. European botanical texts overlooked it. When scientists began cataloging global crops in the 1800s, this grain received minimal attention. The plant was technically known, but practically invisible. It was not until the 1970s that Western researchers began examining what had been lost. Scientists studying alternative crops discovered a grain with properties that seemed almost designed for the challenges facing modern agriculture. And what they found explains why this grain may be more important for human survival than any crop currently dominating global food systems. The grain belongs to a special category of plants that use C4 photosynthesis. Most crops, including wheat, rice, and soybeans, use C3 photosynthesis. The technical difference matters enormously in a warming world. C4 plants show higher water use efficiency. They maintain higher photosynthesis rates under elevated temperatures, and they thrive even in nitrogen-poor soil where other crops struggle. As climate change accelerates, traditional crops face mounting stress. Droughts reduce yields, heat waves damage harvests, unpredictable rainfall patterns disrupt planting schedules. Farmers across the American Midwest watch their corn wither during summer heat domes. Rice paddies in Southeast Asia face saltwater intrusion from rising seas. Wheat harvests in Southern Europe decline year after year. This grain offers something different. Researchers have confirmed its exceptional tolerance to drought. Once established, the plant survives on minimal water. It tolerates high salinity soils that would kill conventional crops. It adapts to both hilly terrain and open plains. It continues producing grain through conditions that devastate other harvests. The yield potential is equally remarkable. In Missouri, agricultural trials routinely achieve 1,000 pounds per acre. Some trials have doubled that figure. Across South and Central America, yields reach 4,600 to 7,200 kilograms per hectare under optimal conditions. A single plant can produce more than 500 grams of grain. But the self-seeding characteristic truly sets this grain apart. The seeds are extraordinarily small, between 850 and 1,700 seeds per gram. A single plant produces thousands of these tiny seeds. When harvest occurs, some seeds inevitably fall to the ground. They remain viable in soil for years. When spring arrives, they germinate without human intervention. Farmers who grow this grain describe a phenomenon that sounds almost miraculous to those accustomed to annual seed purchases. You plant once. The following year, volunteers appear where seeds dropped during harvest. The year after that, more volunteers. Within a few seasons, the grain has naturalized. It returns each spring without permission, without purchase, without planting. One farm in the northeastern United States documented this directly. After several years of cultivation, the grain seeded itself so prolifically that farmers now harvest young plants as a thinning method. They eat the greens throughout summer and still harvest grain at season's end. The crop has become self-sustaining infrastructure. This characteristic explains one of the deeper mysteries surrounding this grain's obscurity. Modern agricultural systems depend on repeat purchases. Farmers spend $60 billion annually on seeds globally. Corn, soy, wheat, cotton, all annual crops requiring new seed every planting season. The business model demands repetition. Farmers must buy again and again and again. A self-seeding grain breaks this model entirely. Buy seed once, plant once, harvest forever. No corporation benefits from this transaction. No quarterly earnings improve. No shareholder value increases. The pattern extends beyond seed sales. This grain requires minimal processing for consumption. You can cook the whole grain like rice. You can grind it into flour with simple equipment. You can pop it like popcorn with nothing but a dry pan and heat. No industrial facility is required, no extraction technology to license, no complex supply chain to maintain. Compare this to the foods that dominate Western grocery shelves. Protein powders require factory processing. Magnesium supplements require extraction and encapsulation. Breakfast cereals require industrial transformation of raw ingredients. Each step adds cost. Each step adds profit margin. Each step adds distance between the food and the person eating it. A grain that requires almost no processing cannot generate processing revenue. A crop that requires no annual seed purchases cannot generate seed company profits. A food that grows itself cannot be controlled by the systems that control other foods. This is not conspiracy. This is economics. Companies fund research that supports their products. They do not fund research that makes their products unnecessary. Universities pursue grants from available sources. The sources favor patentable interventions. A self-seeding ancient grain cannot be patented. The funding flows elsewhere. The research follows the funding. The knowledge gaps persist. And yet the market is finally awakening to what indigenous peoples knew for millennia. The global amaranth market size was estimated at $13.9 billion in 2025 and is expected to reach $21.8 billion by 2033, growing at a compound annual growth rate of 6%. Global amaranth cultivation exceeded 600,000 hectares in 2024. In the United States alone, amaranth cultivation covers approximately 12,000 hectares, producing nearly 30,000 metric tons of grain annually. Asia-Pacific now dominates the amaranth market with the largest revenue share of nearly 43%. The region has a large population of health-conscious consumers who are increasingly adopting plant-based diets and looking for healthy and nutritious food products, leading to an increase in demand for amaranth. The region has also seen a growing trend of gluten-free products due to increasing awareness of gluten intolerance and celiac disease. And as amaranth is naturally gluten-free, it has become a popular ingredient. Yet despite this explosive market growth, most Western consumers still do not know the grain's name. The growth happens in specialty health stores, in Asian markets, in Latin American groceries. Mainstream supermarkets continue dedicating aisle space to processed alternatives, while this ancient grain remains confined to obscure sections. And yet some institutions recognize this grain's extraordinary potential. NASA scientists studying crops for long-duration space missions identified this grain as exceptionally promising. The reasons align perfectly with space agriculture requirements: high nutrient density in minimal growing space, tolerance for harsh conditions, edible leaves and seeds providing dietary variety. National Geographic reported that NASA recommended this grain for consumption in space missions. The World Health Organization named it a well-balanced food suitable for global nutrition programs. Research published in peer-reviewed journals confirms that amaranth may find wide application in the prevention and treatment of some civilization diseases such as ischemic heart disease, allergy, type 2 diabetes, and celiac disease. The health benefits attributed include decreasing plasma cholesterol levels, stimulating the immune system, exerting an anti-tumor activity, reducing blood glucose levels, and improving conditions of hypertension and anemia. The grain contains squalene, a compound previously sourced primarily from shark liver oil. Cosmetic and pharmaceutical companies prize squalene for its properties. Shark populations suffered from harvesting pressure to meet demand. Amaranth oil includes 5 to 8% squalene, a compound also found in olive oil but typically at 0.5 to 1%. More accessible, more affordable, more sustainable than hunting sharks. Some animal studies have found that amaranth may have cholesterol-lowering properties. One study in hamsters showed that amaranth oil decreased total and bad LDL cholesterol by 15% and 22% respectively. Russian researchers found that patients with coronary heart disease and hypertension showed benefits from including amaranth in their diets, with significant decreases in total cholesterol, triglycerides, and LDL. Several studies have found that amaranth could have an anti-inflammatory effect in the body. In one test tube study, amaranth was found to reduce several markers of inflammation. Lunasin is a peptide identified in amaranth that is widely thought to have cancer-preventive benefits as well as possibly blocking inflammation that accompanies several chronic health conditions such as diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. Additional bioactive peptides in amaranth protein were found to have anti-hypertensive properties. Yet this research remained largely invisible to Western consumers. The studies existed in scientific journals that ordinary people never read. The findings appeared in publications written in technical language. No marketing budget promoted the results. No supplement company funded awareness campaigns. The knowledge accumulated in academic databases while grocery stores continued to sell products that this grain could partially replace. The global picture reveals the absurdity of Western ignorance. Across Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean, millions of people eat this grain and its greens regularly. In India, traditional dishes incorporate the leaves into everyday cooking. Nigerian cuisine features the greens in stewed preparations that have fed families for generations. Vietnamese soups use the plant in recipes passed down through centuries. The grain represents something profound. It is one of those foods that history tried to erase but could not. Colonial powers burned the fields. They cut off the hands of farmers. They banned cultivation under penalty of death. They succeeded in removing the grain from Western consciousness for 500 years, and still it grows. The ancient Greeks understood this about the plant. They named it with a word meaning the never fading, one that does not wither. They recognize something eternal in this crop that produces food, drops its seeds, and returns the following year without asking permission from anyone. Now the question shifts from history to practice. How do you actually grow this grain yourself? The process is remarkably simple. The grain thrives in USDA zones 4 through 10. This covers most of the continental United States and equivalent climate zones across Europe, Australia, and temperate Asia. If you can grow tomatoes, you can grow this grain. Start with your planting window. The grain is frost sensitive, so wait until after your last frost date to direct sow seeds in the garden. Alternatively, start seeds indoors 6 weeks before your last frost for transplanting later. The seeds germinate quickly within 3 to 4 days if temperatures stay between 60 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Choose a location with full sun. The grain tolerates partial shade but produces best in direct sunlight. Soil requirements are forgiving. The plant adapts to clay, loam, or sandy soils. It tolerates poor fertility that would limit other crops. Rich, moist soil produces the highest yields, but the grain survives and produces even in marginal conditions. Plant seeds about 1/4 inch deep. Space plants roughly 12 inches apart, though crowding is tolerated. Water during establishment, particularly in the first few weeks after germination. Once established, watering becomes optional. The grain is drought tolerant enough to survive on natural rainfall in most climates. During extended dry periods, water once or twice weekly. The growing season spans 40 to 50 days for leaf harvest and longer for grain production. Throughout summer, harvest leaves for eating fresh or cooked. The greens taste similar to spinach with slightly more earthy depth. Use them in salads. Wilt them as a side dish. Add them to soups and stews. The nutritional profile exceeds spinach in antioxidants and rivals it in other nutrients. As summer progresses, the plant develops dramatic seed heads. Some varieties produce brilliant red or purple plumes. Others show gold or green. These seed heads attract attention in any garden, providing ornamental value alongside food production. Allow some plants to fully mature and set seed. When the seed heads dry and begin dropping seeds, harvest by cutting the heads and placing them in paper bags. Shake the bags to separate seeds from chaff. Store dried seeds in airtight containers for future planting or for eating. Store seeds in a cool, dry place. The grain cooks like any whole grain. Simmer 1 part grain in 2.5 parts water for about 20 minutes until the water absorbs. The cooked grain has a slightly nutty flavor and a texture some describe as a bit gelatinous. Use it as a base for grain bowls. Add it to soups for protein and texture. Mix it into baked goods for nutritional enhancement. Popping the grain requires only a dry, hot pan. Heat the pan over high heat. Add a small amount of grain in a single layer. The seeds pop within seconds, puffing up like tiny popcorn. The popped grain makes excellent cereal, snack food, or topping for other dishes. In Mexico, this popped grain combines with honey or molasses and sometimes chocolate to create a traditional candy called alegría. The word translates to joy in English. Street vendors across Mexico City sell alegría in bars and shapes that have delighted children for generations. The tradition survived colonial suppression and continues today in markets where conquistadors once walked. For the self-seeding promise, simply allow some plants to drop their seeds naturally. Do not harvest every seed head. Leave some to mature and scatter. The following spring, watch for volunteer seedlings appearing where seeds fell. Thin these volunteers as needed. Eat the thinnings as greens. Let remaining plants grow to maturity. Repeat forever. Within a few growing seasons, you will have established a permanent food source. The grain returns each spring without purchase. It requires no expensive inputs. It feeds you protein, magnesium, iron, and antioxidants while demanding almost nothing in return. This is what resilience actually looks like. Not stockpiles of packaged foods that eventually expire. Not supplements manufactured in distant factories. Not dependence on supply chains that stretch across oceans and can break at any moment. Resilience is a plant that returns every spring without asking, a plant that feeds you, provides medicine, and replants itself while you sleep. The supplement industry will not tell you about this grain. They generate billions in annual revenue selling processed nutrients extracted from various sources. A backyard plant that provides superior nutrition threatens the entire business model. The seed industry will not promote this grain. Their profits depend on repeat purchases every planting season. A crop that self-seeds forever generates exactly one sale and then eliminates future demand. The processed food industry has no interest in this grain. They profit from complexity, from transformation, from adding value through manufacturing steps. A grain you can cook whole or pop in a pan needs no industrial processing and therefore generates no industrial profit. This is not conspiracy. This is structure. Economic systems see what benefits economic systems. Marketing budgets flow to products with profit margins. Research funding follows patentable opportunities. A self-seeding ancient grain that cannot be patented and requires no processing simply falls outside the system's field of vision. But you see it now. You know that a grain exists with 200% more magnesium than spinach. You know it contains complete protein with all 9 essential amino acids. You know it survived 500 years of suppression by colonial powers who burned fields and severed hands. You know it self-seeds forever once established. You know NASA considered it for space missions. And the World Health Organization recommended it for global nutrition. You know its name now, Amaranth. The Aztecs called it Huautli. They built an empire partly on its nutritional foundation. They wove it into ceremonies that bound communities together. Spanish conquistadors tried to eliminate it from human memory. They failed. The plant waited. It always waits. Amaranth has grown across the Americas for 8,000 years. It survived the collapse of civilizations. It survived colonization. It survived 5 centuries of deliberate erasure. It survived being ignored by the most powerful food systems in human history. And it is still there, still growing, still producing more magnesium than spinach, still offering complete protein, still dropping seeds that germinate the following spring. The seed companies will not tell you. The supplement industry will not tell you. The agricultural establishment will not tell you. The information threatens too many revenue streams. But Amaranth does not care about revenue streams. It cares about reproduction. It cares about spreading. It cares about establishing itself wherever soil and sunlight permit. For 8,000 years, this grain has pursued a single agenda. It will continue for 8,000 more. The question was never, why did ancient civilizations hide this grain? They did not hide anything. Aztec farmers grew it in quantities that staggered European observers. Mexican families today make alegria the same way their ancestors did before Columbus was born. African, Asian, and Latin American cuisines feature amaranth in dishes that have fed billions over centuries. The question is why Western systems failed to notice. Why did grocery stores fill with processed magnesium supplements while a plant delivering 3 times the magnesium of spinach grew unmentioned? Why did protein powder become a billion-dollar industry while a complete protein grain remained in obscure health food bins? Why did 500 years pass between colonial suppression and the moment you first heard what amaranth actually offers? The answer is structural. What cannot be patented cannot be marketed. What cannot be marketed does not enter consciousness. What does not enter consciousness does not exist for practical purposes. Multiple generations of Westerners grew up without knowing Amaranth's name, not because anyone actively suppressed the information, because no one profited from spreading it. Researchers now recognize that amaranth may be a key factor in reducing hunger in underdeveloped countries. Amaranth should be recognized as one of the extremely promising nutritional and healthy crops with great potential to feed the global population. This potential is still underexploited. Due to climate change, the problem of world hunger, and changes in crop profiles in European and other countries around the world, it is becoming desirable to look for new plants with high nutritional potential that can be combined with health benefits. Amaranth is a plant with valuable qualities as food, and additionally with many valuable health properties. Additional important advantages of this plant are satisfactory yield performance, drought resistance, and enhanced photosynthesis. You know now. You know the numbers, you know the history, you know the science, you know the economics, and you know how to grow it. One planting, forever food. That is the promise Amaranth made to humanity 8,000 years ago. It is a promise the plant keeps to this day for anyone willing to learn its name and put seeds in soil. The hands they cut off for growing this grain belong to farmers who understood something we are only now relearning. Some foods are more than nutrition. Some foods are infrastructure. Some foods are resistance. Amaranth is all three. Find seeds, plant them, harvest leaves and grain. Let some seeds drop. Watch volunteers appear the following spring. Repeat until the pattern becomes permanent. The grain that empire tried to erase now grows in your awareness. What you do with this knowledge determines whether it also grows in your garden. 7 plants total. Each one feeds both humans and animals. Each one grows with minimal input. Each one was banned, restricted, or systematically ignored. The science confirms what traditional knowledge preserved. These plants were never hidden. They were devalued. 7 plants that feed both humans and animals. 0 cost when grown on your property. Complete protein, complete nutrition, and complete independence from the feed store. The industries profit from your dependence. These plants offer something else: self-sufficiency, food security, knowledge that passes down generations. The plants never hid. We just refuse to see.